Are you optimistic about the future?
Uh, I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, it's going to unfold in some crazy and unintended and unpredictable ways. I'm sure of that. And I know there's going to be some horrible things that are going to happen, but there's also potential for a lot of great things to happen too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, ultimately I'm an optimist, but it's hard not to have that doomsday thinking in the back of your mind with all the stuff that we're fed these days.
Yeah. Was there a moment where you realized a song could be whatever you wanted it to be?
I think it took me time to realize that a song isn't factual, or necessarily autobiographical in the sense that it has to always represent where you are.
Yeah.
So a song can really represent a moment in time, a moment of feeling, one way of feeling something, and in a way, the more detailed it is, the better. And ironically, then the more universal it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think at first, when I first started playing around with songwriting, you get stuck because, if you write something down, you think, well, that might be true in this scenario, but this other scenario, that's not true. And then, of course, that's just a waste of time. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to write about one scenario.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Is there a piece of advice that you carry with you now that you initially brushed off?
Piece of advice I brushed off. I don't think I ever brushed off advice, but I think sometimes you don't truly understand the advice until years later.
Yeah.
God, and I know I have a good example of that lurking somewhere in my brain, but it's not coming to me right now. but of just things, that people have said, and it's not that I've brushed it off or ever even forgotten it, but it's that I just didn't get it until I had more life experience under my belt.
Well, why the stand-up bass? Why was that the instrument, or the bass in general? Why was that the instrument that called to you aside from others?
It came to me. I didn't really go after it. It just kind of happened. My brother, who is older than me, like by 4 years, and he got interested in playing the bass. One Christmas, he got an electric bass, and he played it for a while, but then decided that guitar is really what he wanted to do. And so the bass was sitting around, and he taught me how to play the blues, and we were able to play a little bit together, but that just is what sparked it. It just went from there. And I think really, in hindsight, what kept me on the path is, I was always, whatever came along at that point in my life, I probably would have worked hard at it.
Yeah.
I was just that kind of kid. But then I was lucky to have some great teachers early on. And that's I think it's after I read that Malcolm Gladwell book, Outliers, where I realized, I looked back and understood, I had this amazing young teacher who now is in the Chicago Philharmonic as a bass player, but he could do anything. He was very talented, and he's the one that convinced me to take on the upright bass. And then when I got to high school, the jazz band director was also a professional upright bass player in the Denver area. So I just had these great mentors along the way that taught me, encouraged me, and actually got me gigs early on.
What have you been discovering about the bass lately? Because I mean, it's always a continual evolution, but what are you discovering lately?
I don't know. I found, I guess, in the last few years. I've always worked hard at being very technically proficient at the instrument, and to have, soloistic ability on the instrument. But I found that more and more that I hear people play like that, I rarely ever like it. So I start to wonder, like, is that really, how much energy is worth putting into that direction on the instrument? Because even at its best, for me, when you see or hear, these incredibly proficient people who can play very soloistic on the bass, I almost never feel that music strike me, in my heart, in an emotional way. Like it's always just show. And not to say that there's an impossible or there's not exceptions, but it's just as a rule, I just start to wonder, is that really what the instrument is good for?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think part of that is because a lot of people, and myself at times included, have pursued that kind of stuff, imitating something other than the bass, imitating a cello or imitating a guitar, instead of finding just what does the bass do that no other instrument can do. I think that's just what needs to be explored more. And, so much of it has to do with your tone and your rhythm. And I find that tone is just really the most important thing, tone and rhythm. And then you can play one note and it sounds great.
Well, it's one of those things, too, where the beauty is in the space between the notes, and also the key sometimes is what to leave out,
Yeah, and also it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes some people approach an instrument as the playing of the instrument is the end thing. That's the most important thing. Or you can also approach your instrument and it's like, well, it's just this thing that makes sound, and the music that you end up making, that's the goal. That's what's most important.
Yeah. Like the instrument's the vehicle to whatever's in your head.
Yeah, it's just a vehicle. So it kind of makes you take the instrument itself a little less seriously.
Yeah.
And just use it as a tool, and just think of the music as really your instrument. That's where the creation is happening.
Well, my final question is, what is it like touring and performing and meeting people of all walks of life and having incredible moments on stage with an audience and things of that nature? What has that taught you about what it means to be a human being?
Well, in some ways, it's like any job. You got your good days and your bad days. And your ego plays a big part in that. And, it's always very interesting to me that how you felt that a concert went often has nothing to do with how the concert went in the eyes of the people watching the concert, in the same way that if you look at your calendar and you think, oh, this day is crazy, the scheduling, that day is going to be horrible, but this other day is nice and mellow and it's going to be that should be a really pleasant day. And often it doesn't turn out that way. The crazy schedule day that you think is going to be a nightmare, for some reason that you could have never predicted, ends up being a great day. So I think little by little, you just learn over and over and over and over again that you're kind of not in control. Things happen the way they happen, and good gigs and bad gigs and good days and bad days just come in waves, and you don't necessarily know why.
Yeah. Well, it's like
so all you can do is pay attention. That's all it comes down to. It's just that's all you got.
Yeah, and the one thing you have control over, I guess you could say, is how you react.
Absolutely, your attitude and your reaction. But that takes paying attention.
Yeah, agreed.
Because if you're not paying attention, you'll react like a reflex, maybe negatively. But if you are paying attention, you realize you have a choice about how you react. So, but that's sometimes hard to remember. I mean, I think remembering that is, in the heat of the moment, is often difficult for people. So for me, I forget, and then I have to remember. It's like, oh yeah, I have a choice.
Well, thank you.